Officially our last 3160 session. Isn't that sad?
Yes.
It's sad. Yeah. It's amazing how quickly that goes. So today we've got several things on the agenda. It's really just kind of a wrap-up meeting to make sure that we're all on the same page, literally, before you go off and start doing some of your writing. We're talking a little bit about paper requirements and get a status of update on where you are and what you're working on. We're going to talk a little bit about deadlines and timing for spring semester, and also as part of that, the common time meeting that we're going to have together with the 4160 group in April. So I'll go through that with you. This is your last opportunity to ask all the questions that you might have. So if there's anything that you want to know about sort of requirements and due dates, all that kind of thing, we're going to get all of that on the table so everybody leaves the room today just clear, crystal clear about exactly what we need to do. So first thing, if you look at the stapled handout with the research proposal details and rubric on it, so this information is all available at Canvas, but we wanted to make sure you had a hard copy of it to look at so we can talk about it today and see if there's any questions that you would have. So let's just take a look at it together. I'm not going to read everything on here to you, but I do want to highlight some things with you. So bottom line is we often get asked how long is the research proposal supposed to be. I suggested on here 5 to 7 pages. We've had people that have written a little bit more than that. It depends on your topic and what you need to say. But I just wanted you to get that in your head so you're not thinking that this is supposed to be a 20-page paper or something. You know, 5 to 7 pages is probably going to be enough. But if you run more than that, that's okay. I get asked that question sometimes too, because sometimes you've been told by professors if they say 5 to 7 pages and you write 8, they'll tear the 8th page off and you ignore it. I don't do that. But I did have an instructor once that did that in a class that I took. I don't know if you've ever been in that boat. But he used to tell us he'd give us something to read and we'd have to write a 2-page summary. And he'd say, when I say 2 pages, I mean 2 pages. Not 1 1/2, I won't accept it. And if you write 4 pages, I'll tear the last 2 pages off and I'll only read the first 2. So you better make it good. So he absolutely had to have 2 pages. And I think people have had those kinds of experiences, and sometimes you read 5 to 7 and you think if it's more than 7, he's not going to read it. Well, it can be more than that for me. So it starts off first page, or front page, is a title page with an abstract. And so on that title page, you're going to include the title, your name, the date, this course, and an abstract. So the abstract is an italicized statement. It's about 2 or 3 sentences, and it summarizes, if you were to do a study on this topic, kind of really just think of it as the abstract is kind of a summary of what I'm about to read. You know, if you take your entire paper and condense it into 2 or 3 sentences, what is this paper going to be all about? What's it going to tell me? Okay. Now that will translate next year when you actually do your research in the field and you collect data and you analyze the data and you write all of that up. Then your abstract will change because the abstract will then be a summary of what you found out in your study. You know, I studied 9th graders studying learning biology, and what I learned was, and you're going to write a kind of a summary of all the work that you did. For our purposes here, just to get you in the habit of doing that, it's 2 or 3 sentences, just kind of summarizing what your paper is going to be all about. Okay, does that make sense so far? All right. So I flip past that, and the next thing in your paper should be your introduction. So we've talked about that. I'll talk about that a lot in the fall, but it's really you have a certain issue in education that you are very interested in, and it's what you're writing your paper about. So what is that problem? What is the research issue or the topic that you are interested in writing about, and why are you interested in it? And so that introduction should give me some insight into what area. So maybe you're going to be studying cooperative learning in a 6th grade science classroom. Well, why are you interested in that? Tell me a little bit about where your interest came from, what you would be interested in researching and studying and so forth, a little bit of detail. Okay? So that's the introduction. And usually that introduction is going to run, you've seen some samples of that. They tend to run a couple of pages, maybe a page or 2, kind of giving us some thoughts about what you're about to study. And the heart of your paper really is this, it's the literature review. Okay? So the literature review, if you look on your handout, it should examine the current research on the topic. What have other researchers already done? What do we know from previous studies? And we have a chapter in your textbook, Reviews for 3160, that is on literature reviews. And it gives examples, suggestions, details, and stuff like that. So you have lots of information to draw from there. But this is really the core of your writing. And you're going through there and talking about sort of specifically what do we already know not the first person to be interested in it, you're not the first person that would ever research it, so what have other people already found out? We're going to walk through that next section. That'll be the bulk of your paper. It'll probably run at least maybe 2 or 3 pages, maybe more than that. Okay. So if you have a title page and you have a couple pages here, and you have at least 3-ish pages here, now we're already up to 5 or 6 pages, and we're kind of in that 5 to 7 range. Because the next part of it is going to be fairly short, and the next part is the methodology, and this is laid out in your descriptor here as a short draft of just a couple of paragraphs in which you indicate what type of data could be collected or how the research will be conducted to investigate your problem of interest. Now this is a change because when we did the 3160 the last couple of years, in writing this proposal, we assumed that you already had a topic that was chosen for what you were going to study when you do your student teaching. And so people had to write about in this specifically, when you go to do your student teaching, here's how I'm going to collect the data. But what we're doing here is we're leaving it very open-ended for you because this is just an exercise for you. It's practice of writing an intro and a literature review. And so it may very well be when you get into your field setting in the fall and you get your placement and you're in your classroom that you decide that you really don't want to do your paper on the stuff you wrote about this semester. And if you decide to change your mind and do it on a totally different topic, that's going to be okay. But on the other hand, a lot of you will follow on doing the same thing. You know, I knew I was going to study 6th graders and cooperative learning. By the way, I'm in a 6th grade classroom and I had an opportunity to do that, so I'm going to continue on with it. So all we're asking here is, you're talking about, you've done a literature review where you've said, here is what other people have already found out about my topic, and then you're going to go into here and talk about, if I could do my own study, if I had my own 6th grade classroom and I was teaching, using cooperative learning, here's what I would do. I might collect data by interviewing students or giving them this survey or whatever. You're going to explain what your methodology might be, how you might do research if you had an opportunity to do that. Okay? And if you do have that opportunity in the fall, you're going to expand this section then and talk specifically about how you're going to collect your data. And then all we do when you go into the 4160 process is we expand on that. You detail out your methodology of exactly how you're going to collect the data. And during your student teaching, you actually collect it, analyze, write about it, draw conclusions, and it sort of fills out your whole paper. Okay? So those are the main areas. And the last area, of course, is the bibliography. And there's a description on here. The proposal should conclude with a list of all the resources you used to write your paper in APA style. While there's no rule for a total number of sources, as expected, you'll have at least 6 to 8 cited to provide the depth of discussion in the literature review. It's really those studies that you're going to be citing back here. You don't want your paper to hinge on just 2 or 3 things that other people have done. We're expecting to see at least 6 or 8 of them down here as part. Okay. So is it clear what you need to do when you're writing? Rachel?
Should there be like conclusion paragraph kind of?
No, there doesn't have to be. That's a good question. There will be, conclusion is going to be, hi Cheryl. The conclusion is going to be your big part when you actually do the research in the field. But for our purposes right now, and I know it feels like it's like a little bit left hanging, but in a way it sort of is, because this is not a traditional paper in the sense of I write an introduction and I write a conclusion and I tell my story in between. What we're really trying to gear you up for here is just giving you some practice in identifying a problem, explaining why it's an important issue, and talking about what other people have already done and how you might do research in your classes. And you can just end it right there. You don't need a conclusion. Okay, thanks for asking that. But you will be, when you do the research in the field, the conclusion is the heart and soul, right? You're going to go out and collect that data and analyze it and think about it, and you're going to be writing a conclusion based on all the data you've collected. I just had a meeting earlier today with one of our students that was in cohort 1 that graduated last year, and we were talking about this. As a matter of fact, we just started talking about the whole action process, and he said, it was really interesting. He said, of all the things that I did last year in his senior year, this project was the highlight of my year, because he said, even though it feels like it's a lot of work, when you actually get out there in the field, and this is what he was telling me today, it was just so cool to hear from me. So when you get out in the field and you actually start collecting data on how effective or not effective your teaching is, and you start to analyze that and realize that, wow, I should have done this, or I'm glad I did that, it really starts to open your eyes to how your students are learning or not learning based on the things that you're doing. And he said, of all the things I did last year, that was the highlight of my senior year. We really hope that you're in that category next year, that you see it as a great opportunity to look at your students and look at your teaching in a different way that you wouldn't be pushed into if you didn't have this kind of a project to do. So it's really gearing you up to do that. Okay, if you look down at the note down at the bottom, it says that the introduction and literature review are the most important features of the paper. The idea is to give each student an opportunity to investigate some area of interest and explain why you're interested and other research that's already been done. And to reiterate what I said earlier, next year you may continue to build on that same idea, or your interest or placement may result in choosing a new topic to investigate. Consider this to be a practice round when you get the experience of the writing part of an action research paper. Okay? So if you flip to the last page of this handout, it is an assessment rubric. And this is the rubric that your advisors will use when they actually grade your research paper. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on this, because this is actually the exact same, or not exact, there's a couple bullet changes, but it's really the same rubric that we use for the 4160 final paper. And I do that deliberately so you can use the same thing twice. You know, whatever it is we're looking for this year as part of your paper, we're going to be looking for the same stuff when you do your final paper. And so the main categories, there's several categories here. So the first one is, this is out of 100 points, we're looking for clarity of your writing. Is it logical? So you routinely and completely explain the how and why in your paper, you have evidence and so forth. So it's clarity of your writing. The second area is accuracy and precision. If you use key theories or terms, did you use the right kinds of terms and words, etc.? Did you illustrate knowledge and understanding of your topic? So it's really about how well you know your topic and how accurate you are. The third section is depth, relevance, and significance. So did you analyze research that went sort of beyond the description? So in other words, when you were doing your literature review, did you just say this is what somebody has already done, or do you make comments on it? Do you show in your writing clear understanding of other studies that have been done? So we're kind of looking at the depth of your writing. A fourth category is your writing style. So we're looking at sentence structure. Is the paper proofread? Is your writing clear? Smooth transitions, just how well the paper is actually written. You get 15 points for properly using APA. If you have any questions about APA, there are links to that, to the APA guidelines at Canvas. We have a couple of books, I believe, in here, right, that's on these shelves. Properly using APA, there's all kinds of websites, but make sure that you have used APA style properly. And then lastly, just having met the requirements, that you have all the things in it that are supposed to be there. So there's a certain point value attached to each one. Your advisor will circle your point value in each category, give you a total score out of 100 points. Okay. Cheryl, do you want to add anything? You've been down this road before in terms of what you look for, or what you, maybe stumbling points that people might run into when you're doing the writing, or anything that...
Well, the biggest stumbling block is putting it off too long. That's the, that's a big one, because then you get to that point, then you get to that point where you're not doing your best work. You're kind of in a rush and things like that. But I find that the more you can meet with your advisors and we can talk about it, the better that is too. So please do that with your mentors. I don't see anything really in particular that is a real problem except the putting it off.
Yeah, the putting it off is, thanks Cheryl, the putting it off is so easy to do. We all do it. Because we got other deadlines that come in the meantime. Your paper is not due for a month. So you look at that and say, okay, I got another month to work on this. A month is going to go really fast, right? I mean, it's only 4 weeks, and so all of a sudden you're going to be 2 weeks down the road and saying, oh my gosh, I got so much stuff to do. But the fact of the matter is that this is, you can kind of almost think of it like a term paper that you're writing for any other class. And it's not unusual at the beginning of the semester to be given a paper that you got 4 or 5 weeks to write. This is what we've been talking and thinking about it all year. But I definitely want to amplify that, because we do better work if we spend more time on things. And if you at least get a draft knocked out that you can be tweaking and running by an advisor between now and then, it's going to be a much better paper than something you try to do at the last minute and throw at somebody. So.
Yeah, and one more thing. You just alluded to it, Dr. Blair. The idea that when you actually get your assignment, you don't know what that is right now, so you're kind of imagining, like, this is what I'd like to know about kids. But when you get your assignment and you get to know your students, you may, in fact, you will find that either because of what you're teaching and who you're working with, or just the kids you have, you might want to modify. And so don't be frustrated about that. Your idea right now should be something that sort of